I now call this meeting of Davenport Community School District Board of Directors to order. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Director Gordon, would you please read the mission and vision statements?
Mission statement: the Davenport Community School District is dedicated to growing excellence in academics, arts, and athletics for every child by ensuring the highest quality education in an environment shaped by our diverse community, preparing our students to be lifelong learners and productive citizens. Vision statement: education that challenges conventional thinking, prepares all students to compete in a global society, and inspires our students, parents, staff, and community to answer the question, what if?
Thank you. Director Poston, would you please read the guiding principles?
Guiding principles: opportunity. We provide abundant opportunities to empower students to reach their full potential academically, creatively, and socially. Collaboration. We foster an environment that allows students, families, and community stakeholders to come together for the betterment of our students' education and future. Transparency. We share relevant and important information with our students, families, and the community to maintain open and productive communication.
Thank you. Superintendent Schneckloff, would you please read the goals?
Today, we're focused on goal number 4, to foster the innovative use of finances, facilities, and staff.
Thank you. Student board reports. We'll start with you all on the right end because I'm sure you got a boogie down to the Adler.
So first off, good luck to all of the students taking the ACT this weekend. And then Northside Establishment, our show choir, just went to Chicago Invitational this week, Heart of America. We placed 4th. Yeah, and that would be the end of our season. We have one more performance tonight.
Of course, tonight is our show choir, annual show choir show-off performance, performing with all show choirs in Davenport schools. And regarding our theater program, Newsies goes up on March 31st, April 1st, and 2nd. And our NHS Inclusion Week has come to a close this past week. So that was a pretty great success. We had a lot of participation, got a lot of great pictures. So.
Okay, at Central, our boys and girls bowling team ended their season a few weeks ago, and boys bowling was seated at 7 after 10 games, and girls bowling was seated at 3, and they both had a great season, and we are really proud of how far they came. And Central also had 3 individual bowling state qualifiers. Carly Allen finished 23rd for girls, and Brady Krager finished 24th for boys, and Charlie Wooldridge finished 5th for boys as well. And then also yesterday we had one of our senior dancers, Cassidy Gertz, sign with the St. Ambrose dance team, so that was really exciting. And then also on the dance team, cheer team kind of route, Blue Illusion dance team will be holding their tryouts April 1st, and the cheer team will have their tryouts March 25th. And then we also have some cheerleaders on the team visiting Sudlow tomorrow to help interested 8th graders sign up for cheerleading tryouts. And then we also want to give a good luck to the juniors who are taking the free ACT on Wednesday at Central. And then we also want to give a special congratulations to Addison Ford for making the 2nd team All-MAC girls basketball team. And then also congratulations to Asia Pegues for making honorable mention. And then finally, our jazz band, DC Jazz Band 1, has been invited back to participate in the Iowa Jazz Championships for the 2nd straight year in a row. So that's really exciting.
All right, and then as the other schools are, I'll give a shout out to all the West students who are, I don't know the exact date, but who will also be taking the ACTs. I've had the unfortunate ability to do that twice. I would recommend it if you didn't get a great score, but it's not fun. And then also to all of the members of the show choir, and I believe it's every school that will be going to Florida this upcoming week, which I'll be going to too, but not for show choir. So I'll wave to you guys down from Fort Myers. Some news down from Bluegrass. The entire school is currently up to 76% completion of their ST Math program. So that's pretty amazing. I know I'd mentioned another day that was very fun, but unfortunately didn't get to complete it as much as some of my peers. Eric, you know who you are. We had a visit from an author this past Thursday, Nick Stone, who has written a couple of New York Times bestsellers. I won't go too deep into it. It was a very long and very interesting little talk she gave, and she talked with the students about kind of her writing process, why she chose to write what she wrote, some very interesting opinions on social media, and just how her entire life just kind of revolves around her kids go to school, and she just sits down and starts just thinking of new things to really kind of write. And then finally, the speech and debate team went to the Iowa Forensic League state tournament. It's a 3-day competition where we had 3 students who advanced to the semifinal round of the speech part. Mariana Lee in original oratory, Clementine Springsteen in original oratory, and Neo Sotr, I'm not going to try to pronounce that, I apologize, in informative speaking. The following students advanced to the semifinal round and then finals and received awards, and $2,000 scholarship to Simpson College, who hosted the event. We have Opie Amen, 5th in informative speaking, Trinity Merrick, 4th in informative speaking, and Neo, again, not going to try to pronounce your last name, I apologize, for 4th in dramatic interpretation. And then the following student advanced to the final session of Congress, Trinity Merrick, who finished 3rd and received an award, and Neo, for the last time, not going to try to pronounce your last name, I apologize, and that's all I got.
Thank you, student board members. We always appreciate hearing from you. Good luck at the show choir. Oh, go Director Gordon, or Director Kleindrome wanted to comment.
I just want to say it was an excellent program today. I know you're leaving, so I wanted to get that in before you leave. And anybody who's watching on YouTube, you should go down the Adler at 7 o'clock and watch. All 3 high schools, their show choirs are excellent. And could you explain, is it free ACT? How's that? The district? Thank you.
Would you like a board report on it?
Yeah, I didn't know. I'm old school, I had to pay for mine.
Yep.
I'll just explain really quickly. It's set up, it's an ACT day that each school will host, and you just go to your counselor and say, I want to do it. I think it's only for juniors. Am I correct? Only juniors. Only juniors are offered it. And if you want to take it before or after, you have to pay for it on your own, but we do offer one day per year, I believe, for free for all juniors.
All right, there are no recognitions tonight. We will move on to presentations. The one and only presentation is on long-range plan update. I'll turn it over to the superintendent.
Thank you. Tonight we have John from Bray and Josh tonight going to share a presentation. The presentation that you're going to see tonight is a potential direction that the district could go coming into phase 1 or coming out of phase 1. Yeah, thank you, Josh, for the correction there. We're pretty excited. All the work that you're going to see here is based off of feedback that came from all of our committee work, all of the community feedback, all wrapped up into one, and it's coming out of our board committee as well. And so what we're looking for tonight is feedback, guidance, next steps. As this spring, we're going to continue to bring forward more and more detailed presentations about the direction we are heading with our long-range facility. But it was crystal clear that there were some that the directions from our committee work, which way we should go. So we incorporated these the best that we could, and we're looking for feedback tonight to continue to fine-tune our next steps. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Josh and John. Thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us. Along the way, I might ask for a little bit of support from both TJ and some of our directors off to the side, because they are all part of groups that have been instrumental in the process of developing master plan. So just a little bit of agenda, just a little bit of where we've been, a little bit of where we think we could be heading, and then if we are to start heading down a path, what does that look like in terms of how it could be completed in time for potential school year starts, and then potential ranges of budget, and then we'll do some Q&A and discussion. So where have we been? We've had a series of committees. Facility Master Plan Committee. We've had a Friends of Davenport Committee. There's been a series of community input forums. We've had a facility assessment, an analysis on the enrollment projections for the next 10 to 30 years. We've worked through this process with the committees, the community, and the district to really develop a lot of information and provide feedback along the way. What that has done is that has gotten us through a series of initial steps. There now are 3 elementary schools which have been identified as closing, which has then required a boundary change within the district so that we can balance attendance for the remaining elementary buildings. This is all part of a process of right-sizing the district so that you can be more operationally nimble and fiscally responsible within the district. We also know that the 6th grade was voted to remain in the elementary buildings through the 24-25 school year. So in original discussions of master planning, we had discussed that coming forward out of this, we would begin to discuss the pathway of transition from elementary to middle as needing to be improved for students in the district. We also discussed that additional projects could be discussed after completing these initial steps. So with that, just a real quick summary, because I like showing these charts. We had our district with the 3 elementaries. We closed those schools and have redistributed students, probably not exactly to how the arrows are pointing, but they have been redistributed so we have a better balance of students attending the remaining elementary buildings within the district, which will take place for the start of the 23-24 calendar year. And then that just kind of shows in blow up what that starts to look like. And as we've talked along the way, there are continued opportunities to continue considering how the future of the district looks. But we also know, based on assessments, feedback, information, that there's still work that really could be done to address how the district starts to look. So as we are sitting today, 14 elementaries, 5 intermediates, which will become middle schools, are 4 high schools. So next steps, where do we go from here? During the original master planning, some of the considerations that were discussed were need to continue to change the organization and pathway in the district. So those first steps have started to happen. Improving the middle school facilities and the middle school experience is important to families within the district and for the teachers delivering curriculum. It was discussed that there needs to be a re-envisioning of the service model at the middle school level. It's important to improve the operational efficiency of the district, and that is district-wide. Improving access to arts, academics, and athletics, big bold words that are sitting right behind you on the wall. Improving considering improvements at the high school and elementary schools is also going to be critical. And then enhancing educational adequacy within the buildings throughout the district is an important factor. So what does that mean? Some of what we were initially discussing was middle school building improvement to change I'm going to start over. Middle school building improvements potentially could consist of additions and renovations at the remaining buildings. Sudlow, Smart, Williams, Wood, Creative Arts Academy needs to be a part of that. Current issues and prospective solutions or the benefit of improvement include factors of 7th and 8th grade programs within these existing buildings have moved into all of the available spaces within the buildings, which means they're using those spaces to provide valuable services that benefit the students in those buildings. Improving the buildings would allow sufficient space for all grade levels, plus providing necessary space to house resources, programs, and services that benefit students and improve the outcomes for those students in their middle school experience. And then there is an opportunity to improve and enhance the vision of education within the district by creating a new and improved environment that keeps students in the district, will help attract new families, and will aid in attracting new staff. So these were goals that were kind of pulled out during this master planning process. So these are points that inform some of the next steps that the groups that I mentioned at the beginning were working on for the next direction. So what does this mean for the middle schools? At the middle school level, it's important to provide or potentially provide an addition and renovation to each facility to support middle school curriculum needs and to support that integration of 6th grade into those buildings. Improving the existing buildings according to the concerns identified through the study process. So you have these buildings that have a need for repair and improvement, dealing with some of those long-term maintenance issues that really add up to some significant costs, but protecting or addressing those helps protect the integrity of those buildings so they can continue to serve for a long time. There's a need for collaboration and flexible use areas. Also, improving the design of the footprints of the buildings so that you have increased sight lines and supervision within the building, which in turn helps increase the safety and security in those buildings where students and staff are moving through on a daily basis. One really important factor was allowing for the creation of a house model within the academic wings of the building. What that means is the physical structure of the building will aid in developing smaller learning communities which are designed to improve relational and social development, enhance student academic engagement, and provide an environment which will improve student outcomes. As one of the directors said, it's taking a large building and making it small without changing the fact that it's still a large building. And right out of the gate, the committee identified that Sudlow and Smart are probably the two buildings in the most dire need to be considered for initial projects, both from a facility assessment standpoint and just from a spatial needs standpoint. So if you start to think about what could Sudlow and Smart be, if you look at the Sudlow property, if Washington is a closed building, it could be removed, which would allow for additional space on the property, which could be utilized for some much needed expansion, and then the existing building be renovated. So what you're seeing is just a quick snapshot of using that space where Washington was to develop some additional hardscape, green space that benefits the students, some parking that is a little bit short on this site, just given the tightness of how much space is there. What's in the left side and kind of the gray color is the existing building, and what's in red could potentially be additional program space. That could be a building addition that has additional space for administrative functions, for collaboration zones for students, for educational space so that you can start to adopt a house model within the footprint of the building, additional specials space such as gymnasium, because you start to get a lot of students in the building and you need multiple opportunities to still create space for the classes being offered. So this starts to speak of how that could start to look at Sudlow. If you move on to Smart, it's a very similar kind of situation. Smart itself is very compressed in terms of how it sits on the available property. However, if the Monroe building was to be demolished, it could make way for much needed green space, some hardscape, some additional paving. But in addition, the street between the Monroe property and the Smart property could be closed to serve as a dedicated drop lane and then shut down during the course of the day so students could freely move between the Smart building and that green space that would then be to the south. The district owns property north of the Smart campus, which means there's ample spots to provide additional parking here on what would become the enlarged Smart campus. High school. Currently, there is work underway at West High School. So there's an expansion project currently happening at West, which is providing some much needed program space for athletics and PE classes there. What hasn't happened is much work at North over the last several years. So some of the hot buttons that have been put forth as a need there, always topping the list is science classrooms. So potentially providing new classrooms to serve as science rooms for that building, which would then give the opportunity to consider remodeling the existing science rooms into classrooms that provide a new and improved space for students in the building. Just improving and enhancing the main building facade, kind of giving a new face to kind of rejuvenate that property as it sits facing 53rd. Improving and enhancing the secure entry and student entry, as well as some of the main office areas. It is a little bit disconnected with how it works there. New media center space to replace the existing building library. This would give an opportunity again to rejuvenate a piece of the core of the building into something that's more beneficial and functional for students to use throughout the course of the day. Reconfigure that science and library into a new and improved classroom layout with collaboration spaces, which will start to set a tone for how additional improvements could continue to happen throughout that building, meaning that North High School can start to take on improvements and it will change and adapt to become the building of the future that you need. What does that look like?
Can I add something?
Oh, yeah.
Just to point out, in all these additions being put on here allows us to also do some work in the existing buildings while we're maybe jockeying some things around. We can get into some things we normally couldn't because of time frames that are allowed just over a summer to do a project. You'd never get to those things. You put paint up on a wall, you replace some ceiling grid, but you never fix the stuff behind the walls that nobody sees or above the ceiling. You never have time to do it all. Whereas if you add these additions on, it starts giving you some time to be able to do the things the right way rather than the quick way.
So, and great points, Josh. Thank you. At North High School, there is green space on the east side of the existing building. You have an opportunity to provide some relief to that building by doing a little bit of addition to the east. If you disrupt any parking, you still have the ability to put some parking on that east side of the building. One thing that's critical there is to not think about building across paving in that particular site. You've got a lot of flat ground, so to speak, but you really need to maintain as much of the parking as possible. So that east presents a nice opportunity to kind of finish off the side of that building, provide some space that's needed, which then would give the opportunity, as Josh says, to work back into the existing building and adapt and reconfigure and reuse. In addition, one thing that's shown on here, which will come up on another slide, is to the north of the building is potentially taking some green property, some grassed property, and turn it into some turf field. There is a consideration that adding turf fields for each of the high schools presents an opportunity for multiple sports and activities to use throughout the course of the year so that you're not tearing up your grass space. It becomes a little bit easier for baseball, softball, soccer, football to use those on an annual basis, which then is what I just summarized on the next slide, which is something that looks kind of like on this pictures. You can lay out a series of turf fields which are sized for football and soccer, but you can create striping and paint configurations so that those can also be utilized for baseball or softball. The picture on the left of this slide actually has a field in the left-hand corner. You might barely notice there's an arc out there. That gets a temporary fence. That is a home softball field for the particular high school that this serves. This was a district that wanted to get as much bang for their buck out of that turf field. And so on the right side was a baseball infield for practice. On the left was the softball practice and competition field, as well as 2 full football fields, 2 full soccer fields, and then a variety of other uses. And then just some down low pictures to the right kind of show how some of the striping and use of that can start to look. It was identified that this could be a benefit for each of the 3 high school campuses, 1 at North, 1 for Central, and something for West as well, would provide more continual opportunity for usage for those individual schools. Also, one thing that has been talked about a lot, and this is a hard one because where do you start and where do you stop? It could take a little bit of money or it could take a ton of money, but elementary school improvements. You have elementaries that are remaining in action and serving your students. So it would be important to begin the process of providing necessary updates and improvements to those buildings district-wide. That can include furniture, which you've already started to consider, technology upgrades, but then also start to look at the interior environment, just creating some pride with some what we call branding, but graphics and imagery throughout the buildings, updating the finishes, maybe improving access to light and air in those buildings, as well as also considering some of those much needed improvements to the exteriors and interiors of those buildings that include mechanical systems, electrical systems, windows, doors, roofs. So there's a lot that could happen there, but what happens then is it starts to speak to changing the way the environment looks and feels, creating some pride for those students in those buildings, creating an environment that responds to the way the curriculum is delivered, and then create an activating and exciting environment that keeps those kids enticed into the learning that they receive in those buildings. And what's on the screen is just some examples of current learning environments from a variety of degrees, from integration of STEM and technology to flexible layouts to the variety of different types of furnitures, as well as some of the opportunities. When we say interior branding, sometimes it's not just emblazoning a school with its name, but using those graphics and images to create opportunities for learning as well. So those students are picking things up as they're working their way through the building from an experiential standpoint. And then also, we just threw in a little picture, even just considering some of the open areas in your building and how do those support the academics by providing opportunities for flexible use and collaboration. And then one thing that's been talked about for quite some time, the district has the Brady Street Athletic Complex. Currently, the baseball field is in the floodplain. It does get flooded there. The practice fields are a little bit compressed, and so you also have a considerable amount of land on that Brady Street complex that includes tennis courts, grass space, the Brady Street Stadium, storage for your bus garage, bus maintenance. And so an opportunity to really dig in and see how could you consolidate your properties and structures there to provide some efficiencies and also provide some much needed relief. So considering getting that baseball field out of the floodplain, could you start to look at moving buses onto some district-owned property that then would provide the ability to better house the baseball field and still maintain space for turf for practices? And then if the baseball stadium moves, does that provide some opportunity for some additional parking just as a relief for the events that happen at Brady Street? In addition, if turf was placed on a field on the Central High School campus or campus adjacent, it then provides the opportunity that Central students have a place that they can practice close to their campus as opposed to having to navigate that travel between Central High School and the Brady Street complex. So that provides a little bit of relief from busing, activity busing, just oversight and management for coaching and parents that are working through the students moving between campus and complex. Long-term also, while we talked about Sudlow and SMART, perhaps in addition, it would be good to consider Williams and Wood for improvements as well. So again, those buildings don't quite need as much. They're in pretty good shape. Williams has a lot of both square footage and property area. Wood has pretty good square footage and property area as well. But again, looking at those buildings and campuses for, again, that opportunity to make those large buildings small by incorporating that house model within the academic wings, which would then help kind of reduce the size of that learning community within those buildings for the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders within there, with the opportunities of, again, increasing safety and security, improving relational and social development, and enhancing that student engagement, and hopefully improving the student outcomes for those campuses. And again, it doesn't take a lot at those buildings. Wood could really adopt into a house model with some minor addition, which is also minimal impact to the footprint of the site. And Williams, even less is needed because it is a pretty sizable building and sizable campus, which would allow, again, use in that house model concept. So that's a lot of stuff. And this is not assumed to all be punching forward at the same time, but if you took a tangible amount of work and tried to put it into a timeline, how could it look? Well, currently, we've gotten through the decision to close elementary schools. We've worked through an attendance boundary change. The district has really been working hard on student and staff transition planning. Those buildings were voted for closure, and those 6th graders are remaining in the current buildings for another school year, which means you could start to look at, if the students, 6th grade students were remaining in elementaries until the start of the 25-26 school year, you could consider that the SMART and Sudlow intermediate remodels could be completed in a time frame that would allow them to be done for the start of a 25-26 school year. That would mean that you need to proceed with considering a demolition of Washington and Monroe ahead of that, which provides space that allows those expansions. North High School could be done in concert in a way that staggers construction but still allows it to be completed in time for use at the start of a 25-26 school year. And then elementary school facility improvements could really happen at any time. They could start as soon as the summer of 23, the summer of 24, the summer of 25. You really have multiple opportunities, but to determine a scope and an approach really would then start to predict what kind of time schedule would be needed so that those could occur in a way that's not super disruptive to the use of those buildings for education. And then if you project it ahead even further, then maybe after those projects would be complete, you could start planning on what it would take to work on that Brady Street complex, look at those improvements at Wood and Williams, as well as additional elementary school improvements, which could then fall in succession and be completed for a education year that falls after that 25, 26, so perhaps the 26, 27 school year. It is not free, unfortunately. This is a lot of stuff and a lot of work. Currently, there is a vote tomorrow. That is a revenue purpose statement vote. Not to put Kevin on the spot, but an original projection talked about use of save and PEPAL money, putting a value at somewhere in the neighborhood of $135 million. How could you start to put those funds to work to create improvements for the district? You currently have the West High School improvement nearing ready for construction bidding. The current budget is falling just under $12 million. Demolition of Washington and Monroe buildings, if you were to consider that, is about $2 million for those buildings. That is demolishing and removing their foundations and getting rid of the utility services there, filling them in. SMART, you could spend anywhere from $12 million to $50 million, and that could be addressing any of the facility study improvement items, so any of those concerns that were brought forth through those facility assessments. The addition and renovation from a kind of a maximum standpoint, if you went all in, it could be $40 million at SMART and $45 million at Sudlow. That is not a solid cost. There's a variable that needs to be explored based on where the board's decision lies. Sudlow could be $9 million to just shy of $56 million. North High School, the improvements that we talked about, science and classrooms and media center, probably about $20 to $25 million. There's a list of facility improvements that could run as high as $19 million. Keep in mind those facility study improvements, those do not all need to be completed at one time. It does make sense to address any of those concerns related to building envelope. Anytime you're going to do remodeling within the building, you'd want to make sure that envelope is repaired and tightened up so that you don't cause a concern with potential leaking or issues with damaging that work you do on the inside. Work on the interior may already become addressed through any remodeling project. So some of that work may already get solved, as well as some of the what's listed as FF&E. Fire protection, plumbing and mechanical, electrical technology and site also are items that some of which will get solved through any addition and remodeling project, which means the exposure of cost that's listed here won't be as high as what's shown on this spreadsheet. Elementary improvements, you could spend any number of money. It becomes more about determining a strategy of do you attack a few buildings with as much as possible or try to distribute a larger sum to more buildings. There's benefits and drawbacks to both approaches. One would say that addressing fewer buildings with more money gets them closer to done and sets kind of a model in place for how you approach other buildings. Another would say the distributing more funds to more buildings just gets a little something everywhere. It's either or. It can be successful. Turf fields at the high school campuses, what we've looked at probably runs in the neighborhood of $2 to $3 million per turf field. So if you did 3 campuses worth, you'd be at about $9 million, about $3 million per campus. If you look at some of those additional projects, Brady Street complex, that really has not been studied in any significant depth. So we don't know if it's It's probably not $1 million. It's a significant chunk of change. It probably costs $1 million to $2 million to move a baseball field. Anything beyond that becomes a question of how far you go. The situation with the Brady Street complex is you will have to work your way sequentially through that, meaning you can't do it all at once. You have to move a piece to make room for another piece, which means creating a strategy of how that looks over a longer period of time. Wood and Williams, again, those are like the Sudlow and Smart projects, only to a much smaller dollar amount because the need for expansion and renovation is less. At Williams, it's more remodeling based, and at Wood, it's predominantly addition based. But you could spend anywhere from $2 million to $26 million at Wood, and as high as $30 million at Williams. Again, as you start to work through renovations and remodeling within the building, you are going to solve a considerable number of those facility assessment items. And then elementary improvements, if you again continue the strategy with continued improvements at the elementary, it's incumbent that you really think about how the strategy is, whether it's one building or many at a time. Okay, so I went through that very fast. There's a lot of information. I'm sure it raises lots and lots of questions, so I'm just going to reel back and open it up.
Are you sure? Director Back.
First of all, thank you. This is really puts a lot of things in perspective. I just have a couple questions right now. I'm sure I'll have more. And this may not be for you guys, but for TJ. Is the CAA going to stay at Sudlow for the foreseeable future?
That is the current, in this model, the current plan.
Okay. And so the idea would be to have more of a dedicated space for that stuff, you know, like a theater, a small theater and a dance floor or something like that for those.
Correct.
Folks. Okay. The second question I have is one thing I've noticed as I've been at both Smart and Sudlow is that those kids are doing activities that need a track, but they don't have a track. And so I would ask that any green space changes include, it doesn't necessarily have to be a quarter-mile track, but include a small track. I've seen kids doing hurdles in a parking lot, and that just seems like a really bad idea. So that would be my one request on that. And then the last one I have, actually two more, sorry. I noticed that with the demolition of Washington and Monroe, there's a break in the summer after the bids. Why would we not try and do the abatement and demolition in the summer rather than in the school year?
I didn't look at the schedule, but my guess is we have to empty those buildings out, get some time to get things out of the buildings that we want to keep.
Okay.
And then we would go into those buildings. So this summer will be a transition time with supplies and equipment.
So it's like
and then,
moving stuff.
Yeah, we'll probably be in there after it's closed, even getting some more stuff out of it. And then we'll proceed with that.
That explains that. And then my last question, I know at Washington at least, they have a really nice playground and it's used as a neighborhood park because there's not a playground within any other walking distance. And I think Monroe probably has one as well. And so I'm wondering if it's possible to not necessarily leave the playground that's there, but have a corner with a playground on it, because I know just, you know, it's not an official neighborhood park, but I've seen families using them on the weekends just as a place to go play.
Yeah. So a couple things there. You, depending on the age of the equipment, typically you can salvage and reuse it. Any strategy for the playground that happens, we did want to provide space at those campuses for playground. And if it was determined that we don't want to move that playground, we did study, could you leave, in this case of the Washington, we came up with a solution that actually left it where it currently sits, so you don't move it at all. We ultimately showed changing it because it got it closer to the building for oversight. just to go back to your question about Sudlow, one of the reasons there's a greater expense shown for Sudlow than Smart is because of the CAA component. There is a higher space burden on the Sudlow building because CAA is there, and that is reflected in the difference in cost between those two.
Kevin, you had something?
One of the things on the abatement piece, it's always much less expensive to abate in the off season, as in not in the summertime. If you could do it in the fall and winter time, your pricing for abatement is going to be so much less. They're so busy in the summer because everybody wants abatement done in the summer when school's out. When we have that opportunity to do it in the off season, it's preferred.
Director Hayes?
I needed, since it was one of your last topics, I needed clarification. I may have written them down wrong. You said approximately 2 million for wood for the additions and 30 million for Williams for renovation, but wasn't that, that should be reversed, shouldn't it? Okay. Also, on slide number 16, could you clarify the directions for me? Because I can't completely tell which direction it's going.
You're talking the north
Yes.
campus?
Mhm.
North is up on this slide, so 53rd Street is about the bottom of the slide.
Okay.
And
Okay.
the pieces to the right are the YMCA and the Performing Arts Center. And then if you look further to the right, you'll see what was the old Menards building to the right side of the slide.
Okay, thank you. I can see that now. I was looking at all angles trying to figure it out.
I should have probably noted, we like to try to put north up when we can.
That's okay.
Sometimes it doesn't fit, but we try to do
Okay.
that.
That's okay. In slide number 19, you discussed the furniture. And one thing I would like to see for sure is matching furnitures in the rooms, because there's so many different pieces that not everything matches and age appropriate, because you see older, like sixth graders, for example, you'll see the older kids and desks they have to squeeze in to get in, and they might be more appropriate for two-piece tables and chairs, and even see a lot of them that are laying on the floor. So perhaps a bean bag or something may make it conducive for them. Slide number 22, you confused me on that one with Central. I'm trying to visualize where would they put something additional rather than going to Brady Stadium. The only thing I see down there that can be used is that field where they practice band being reconfigured, maybe?
So that's going to take a little bit more exploration. There are limited opportunities for property there. The marching band practice field is about a 90-yard piece of ground. That could be one place to consider that. Also, the district is probably going to need to look at, are there properties nearby that could be available for land purchase, land swap, whether it be city property or property that's held by adjacent ownership.
If I take a stab at that, if you look at this existing drawing, right before COVID occurred, Davenport's, this was one of the next projects that was going to occur. It was on the long range plan. So if you look at, yes, sorry, on slide 22, if you were to look at this, the plan and the swaps that all of the land swaps that had currently occurred, if you take the bus barn, which you see there, the slides of the in the upper right hand corner of the yellow, that was going to move to the far right, which you see the big area over there. It's the National Guard area there. The National Guard site, that's where we're going to move our bus barn. And then the baseball field was going to move up into the area where the bus barn and that area was combined. And so that project was slated before. So the reason why we bring that before is because there was a lot of work that went into that. And it's really not, it's necessary because if you've ever gone to a Central baseball game, they're rained out a lot of times when it's just muddy back in here. And so then the baseball diamond would be turned into, could be additional parking, could be additional, many different things, reconfigured, but probably parking. So that's the way that was. That's the way that was.
I think there's some more parking there and potentially some wetland area we may have to reserve or something along those lines.
And then we are looking at the properties that are around Central and trying to be creative, because the difficult part about this is this is the Davenport Schools. Brady Street Stadium is Davenport Schools' home. In order for the Central teams to practice, they have to come here, and it's difficult to operate that way. It really is. And also it appears as a district that they get to practice at Brady Street Stadium a lot. And as John will tell us, Central would gladly have a practice facility right at their home property, because then they wouldn't have to deal with students coming to and from practice. And so it's kind of a double-edged sword a little bit. So hopefully, does that?
It does. Thank you.
We didn't want to get into that level of detail, but there is a project it was all but done, getting ready to move forward, and then operational control, conditional accreditation, pandemic, those kinds of things happened. And so it was very similar to the West Gym project that was on the docket to do as well.
Jackson.
Just a super quick question. I know that you guys had mentioned that along with the expansion of some of the middle schools, there was going to be kind of a filling of some of the white space, so to speak, inside of the buildings. How much of the furniture from the closing elementary schools are going to be brought to these buildings, if any?
We're kind of working on an evaluation process about what stuff is reusable and what stuff's not. I mean, ideally, we'd like to update every school in the district with matching furniture in every classroom, but it's a process, and we need funds to do that. So we have a member of our warehouse team that will look at it and evaluate it and decide whether that will be something we trash and what fund it also needs to follow, because that has something to do with it as well.
Director Gordon.
I have a few questions. So for Sudlow and Smart, let's look at Smart first. So slide 14. A couple things here. So it's been a few years since I've been there, but I used to work there. And right now on that north west side, it shows parking. Is that not a basketball court anymore, or are you talking about turning it into parking?
The consideration is to turn it into parking. The property, if you look to the bottom of the slide, would essentially become the basketball courts and playground and hardscape, more in a spot where it's all together with the other outdoor space for the students. So just for supervision and control, it's all consolidated, but it would still be something that's available for neighborhood use.
Okay, that was kind of where I was going with that, is I want to make sure that there remains a basketball court, or is the new one put in, because I know what a benefit that is to that neighborhood. But also at Sudlow, I don't believe they've had an outdoor basketball court there ever that I can remember. Is that planned in that hardscape area as well?
Yeah, so part of what we recognize with the Sudlow campus is they have some green space, and then they have a building next door. And there's a lot of limitations on what's available on the Sudlow campus. So it's trying to move it in a direction of having more of the same kind of things as Smart. And then eventually, if you start to do work at Williams and Wood, you would do the same for them as well, so that your students at all buildings have sort of equal access to outdoor green space, hardscape, basketball, foursquare, whatever it may be.
Okay. Then my next question was also about Smart. So you had mentioned this the street in between where Monroe currently is and where Smart is being changed to a pickup drop off and then being closed during the school day. So currently the office for Smart sits just north of that road, right? So would that office move? Because I know that there's a lot of traffic in and out of the building throughout the day, in and out of the office.
So, yeah, part of this is creating a better sequence of drop off and pickup so that you can better delineate where buses are, where parents are going. And so one of the considerations is to create a new main entry, secure entry, bring your admin functions together in one consolidated spot, which then allows you to recapture those spaces in the current building and adapt those into other programmatic uses, which then helps you kind of distribute where your services are being provided within the building.
Sure.
And for that building in particular, accessibility, I mean, the stairs are right there, so.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. The other question I had, I guess this is more for TJ. So the central thing, you're looking at spaces around central, right? So is that so that the marching band continues to have their space and we can build a turf and it wouldn't have to be a shared either or? Okay. I was just confused about that. And then the last thing, I don't know if I misheard about this when you were talking about it, but you were talking about sixth grade going to middle school in 25, 26. Did I mishear that?
I might have made the wrong comment. It was 25, 26.
Is that being
right?
Discussed?
24,
25. So it's not going to be 20.
I got too many dates floating. I apologize.
Okay, got it. All right. Just want to make sure I hadn't missed some communication. Thank you.
So the other thing about projects like these middle schools is you can create the addition to the building and outfit it so that students can move into the addition space, which allows you to go back in, remodel the existing, and then open the whole building together. So you can do these projects through the course of a school year and maintain enough room to stay operational and functional throughout the whole thing.
Director Klein-Jerome.
In all of this, I see nothing that addresses Walcott Middle School. And the way Walcott Middle School is arranged, there's no way to create a housing situation. I mean, it's like the letter E, with an elementary down here and junior high here.
We did explore that. There's a considerable amount of expense to do that because that building has what you would call a finger layout. So
Right.
it's got a kind of a main piece and then concourses that
Side,
shoot
side,
off.
side.
You can interconnect between, there becomes some considerable expense there. And so it really becomes just a question of, do you, as a board, want to continue to explore that there as well? When we explored that, originally it was looking at it in a different model. If it's maintaining its operation as a K-8 building, you can only do so much because you want to maintain that separation from the K-5 from the 6-8. So you really have to do a kind of a careful study to make sure that you can provide the appropriate spaces for the house concept for 6 through 8 and then still have appropriate space for the littles to stay separate and kind of somewhat isolated. The building works pretty well as it currently stands for that, given that current layout. TJ, I don't know if you had any other thoughts there.
And there would probably be some minor updates that the elementary area would get updates just like the rest of the schools. It would just depend how much money we would want to stick into them and where.
Well, it's not set up well for a housing model. And so in the past, Walcott really was not middle school. When in town, they all went to the middle school. They remained a junior high. And So if we're leaving it the way it is, we're not really saying we believe out there it should be middle school. Just throwing that out there. Let's see. I'm glad to hear Creative Arts Academy. We plan to keep it at Sudlow because we have invested a lot of money in Creative Arts Academy, fixing up the library, and then we left there, and then the transportation center, then we left there, and now we're at Sudlow. So they've already had a big expense 3 times. So that would be my preference, that at least remain where it is because we've already put a lot of money there. One of the slides said that 7th and 8th grade are taking up an entire building for the junior high. But we had buildings that were 7-9 and 6-8 and larger populations than what we have now. So I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around how we are filling up that building with only 2 grade levels when we've housed 3 with a higher enrollment.
And I might ask if John or Willie might have some support for helping with that as well. But some of it is you had space available, and with additional programs and services, they took over those spaces to use them. So it's not that you don't have space. It's just not the right size and approach for how you do that. And so what might be handled in a small collaboration room or a small group instructional space is happening in a full-size classroom. You have other things that have moved throughout the building, special ed or other programs that have, again, sort of moved into spaces that maybe weren't necessarily constructed for those. And by going back and looking at those and readdressing it gives you the opportunity to put the right programmatic solution for the right programmatic need in those buildings. I don't know if anybody else has any other support or thoughts on that.
Yeah, I look at this as an opportunity just to reimagine what that space looks like. I know in the 2 different stops I had down at Frank L. Smart, I started in a classroom that was a closet, and then I moved to a classroom that was a bigger closet, and then I moved to a gymnasium that then turned into a better gymnasium. And I find this a way for us to look at some of those spaces, and I'm thinking of classrooms down on the first floor that have been traditionally used for one purpose, and really just rethinking how that can open up, how we can provide the sight lines, the security, the things that are important to us and to our community through a reconfiguration and a reimagination. I don't think, that it is necessarily a wholesale, every wall gets knocked down, but I do think it's an opportunity for us to erase some of those pictures that we have that are current spaces and say, hey, this is comparable to what we're seeing in newer facilities. This is what's in the best interest of our kids.
I think the other thing to consider here is when we talk about that idea, that smaller learning community, you're looking to take a building that's potentially 400 to 500,000 kids and create communities of 100 and some kids. When you speak of a smaller junior high or a building that is already broken down into that smaller community, sitting at approximately, what is the student number for Walcott? 200? Yeah, and that's 7th and 8th grade already. Your smaller community already exists in a grade level of 100 between the two, whereas other ones are looking at 200 to 300 and making them smaller. So that's that other concept of that smaller learning community. It already exists out there in that K-8 arena.
North High, are we getting rid of the flexible walls? Collapsible walls?
So typically when you address a building that's constructed like North High, where you're doing that work, you get rid of the what was called a demountable partition. It was meant to be a partition that you could take down, reposition, change the layout. It became a permanent solution. it's really poor on sound control, adaptability for power and technology. You would build that back with some sort of permanent construction, and that would be how you start to approach that as you do any successive remodeling through that building. It would be the right way to go.
Good plan. It was not good when it was built that way. It was noisy. You could hear every classroom next to you. One other concern I have is, when you start saying redoing offices and libraries, because when we originally started putting money into our schools, that's where all the money went, into new libraries and new offices. That meant classrooms weren't touched at all. So I want to say I'm really hesitant to say that's where money's going when it's not touching the classroom.
It's actually a different strategy. It's moving it so that you can create some core academic space in the middle of the building where it's more impactful, and pull that media center in with some commons function and let it be a transitional kind of space in the building, as opposed to a four-walled thing that just kind of blocks flow within the middle of the building. At North, it sits in a position that while it's easily accessible, it is kind of a hardened space, and it would be a really appropriate opportunity to create some flexible, flowing collaboration, some new style of classrooms that can open into that collaboration space that would all happen in the core of the building, right there with all the other academic spaces in the building. So it's really about moving that so that you can make way for something different where it's much needed. Does that answer that?
Yeah, as long as it's in the classrooms more than the library and the office space.
Director Potts.
On the turf idea, I'm sure we're going to do a little cost benefit. How long does it last? Because that has to be replaced, and the replacement cost is going to be more than it is now down the road. We've had to do Brady Street once.
That's my understanding.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we need to consider that. Second, and when remodeling the junior highs, or at least Smart and Sudlow, I'm assuming some consideration is going to be given to increasing from 1 to maybe 2 serving lines in the cafeteria, because it's very hard to get 800 kids through 1 serving line in 90 minutes. You can do it, but the last kid has like 38 seconds. Don't talk, eat.
Part of the strategy with Smart and Subbo is they truly, for the size of building that it would become, they really don't have adequate serving or capacity for the lunching situation. So looking at maybe repurposing some spaces, create a better opportunity for the lunch, but then also providing the right kind of gym space so that you can handle the PE needs, and making sure that you have the right number and up-to-date kind of science and STEM activities within that building as well. But you are absolutely correct. There's just, it's a little bit deficient if you were to try to use that space for any change that's going to happen, it's going to be tight.
Also, when we talk about recreational opportunities after school on the campuses, I think we need to keep in mind of putting basketball courts out there. I know Washington had basketball courts, and the custodian's job at the end of the day was to take the brackets down, because the neighbors would complain that people would be playing basketball 10, 11 o'clock at night. That, as a principal, you don't want to get those phone calls. When we talk about shared spaces, that we talk about that's a wonderful educational philosophy that I'm not sure ever really happens unless we change how we expect teachers to teach. And we've done so many things we have done where this was going to make a huge difference. Smart boards. We had smart boards. That was going to make a huge difference. And for the majority of the teachers, it just became a gigantic overhead projector. So if we don't require something in the curriculum to make teachers use these spaces, I am not optimistic that they will be used as effectively or as efficiently as they could be.
In our world, we say that the curriculum needs, along with the other needs of the building, spaces, influence how we as architects have to respond in design. And then that design in turn enhances the space, which should help support the vision of what the curriculum is. But all it ever is an opportunity. And you are absolutely right. People have to seize that opportunity and make use of it. Change can be a little bit fearful and cause some anxiety. But as long as it's responding to the appropriate needs of the curriculum, it can be successful.
Director Poston?
When you talk about the 3 fields at the 3 high schools, then what are your thoughts as far as at West High? Is there a spot you have in mind to put that? And if so, then what are you going to do with the complex that's out by the National Guard?
So West High, fortunately, has a good amount of green space. There's a soccer field there, there's the band field, and then there's that lower football field track space. There's also on the east side of the building, there is still ample green space along with the tennis courts that are on that side. So you actually have a lot of opportunities to consider there. I think as far as it relates to the West complex, it really comes down to the baseball and softball as to how can you handle gameplay. That is set up for competition. It is still a very good facility. I think definitely for the turf fields, it comes down more to the practice opportunities. And so like the conversation with Brady Street, if you have more opportunities on the West campus, now you're making it where you don't have to transport kids out to that West facility except for gameplay.
It can be used for multiple things too. I mean, soccer, football, baseball, track, all of those things can be done on that field. Summer workouts outside of just the baseball and softball.
And I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around this, but when we're talking about all the additions to the buildings, so we're closing 3 schools, and I don't know, are we taking away 1,500 spaces from the, would that be fair to say? Roughly? Okay. So when our discussion started with about closing schools, we said we had 5,000 extra spaces. Okay. So we've got a long ways to go to use up those extra spaces. So what are your thoughts down the road? I mean, are we closing more buildings? And my concern is if we are closing more buildings, then why are we spending money on additions to buildings?
So that's a really good question. And I think the first phase of this strategy would be to ensure that we would never add to a building that would be potentially closing down the road. And so through the legwork that we've been doing, all the additions that are here would be to buildings that would never close. Or in the foreseeable future. We can obviously say never, but in the foreseeable future, these buildings would be open. It is a goal for us to come back in the spring, and this is the initial conversation. This gets the conversation started. I think there's some very exciting things in here, but we're not done. And there are things that are going to impact our budget and our enrollments, and so we need to continue to work forward. But one of the most important things that we need to do is we need to show growth in the areas that our community showed, and improvements in the areas our community showed, and that's in our middle school. In a time where we have declining enrollment, our high school enrollment stays steady because kids want to come back and they want to be a part of all of the wonderful opportunities that we have. And so an improved middle school model to where there are house systems, to where it is a family. It's nothing new. I'm sure, Bruce, in your time, how many times did you do the middle school to a house model to the junior high? It's nothing new, but this is for us. It's a method that when we get our students around people where they build relationships with, they're successful. So to answer your question, we feel that this is a very solid ground moving forward, knowing that there are other phases. I think one of the most important things that we have to do is review. The very next thing would be to review the ancillary buildings that we have, for example, the bus barns and things of that nature, and then begin to have that conversation of what's the next step, what's the next phase for us. I also think it's important for our community to have a little bit of stability in the phase that we're in. It's really changing a boundary and relocating and filling out transfer option forms is a very traumatic thing for a community. So I also think that it's really important for us to live in the phase that we're in, not for too long, but allow us to be able to move forward, be able to see the future. This is really exciting to me, and we're looking to continue the feedback from the board at if this is the right direction. So it's incredibly important that we get this next step right. The other thing that this allows us to do, thank you, Dan, is the opportunity to looking at our exploratories in the middle school, which is incredibly important to us. Our team has worked really hard to work on a schedule that will bridge the gap for when our sixth graders come back, and they've done so. And so, our career explorations and things of that nature don't start when you're in ninth grade. They're starting to move down. Kids can see this wonderful future, and these spaces allow us to do that as well. Did I answer your question, Kit?
Yeah. But just going back to my comments about the extra spaces we have, so we still have 3,500 extra spaces. If you go back to what we talked about with the original closing, so if we're putting all this money into our intermediate schools, am I correct in saying that we'll be closing more elementary schools?
I wouldn't say that that's correct at this point.
Then what?
I mean, I would say not. That's not the only thing.
Okay.
So I would think that there needs more exploration in that.
Yeah.
Okay. Then how do you sell this to a taxpayer when we still have extra space in our buildings and yet we're putting additions on buildings? To me, that's not going to fly with the taxpayer. And just to follow up to what Director Klein-Jerome said before about 7th and 8th grade right now, it's filling the intermediates, and I understand what you said and what John said as far as some of the spaces aren't actually the right size or the right configuration. But again, when you go down through this potential budget and everything, and we have to do a bond referendum, that's going to be a tough sell.
Well, I would agree with you. One of the things that we run into is that if we could pick a school up and move it over here and completely balance out where our schools are, that's the reason why we can't right out of the gate close more schools, because we have a very high density of population of where our families live. Case in point, Bluegrass, Buffalo, and Walcott. They're very spread out. There's very low density of population. And so that's the big issue that we run into. When Bruce kicked off each one of our meetings and said, if we were starting our district all over, that's the number one issue that we run into. The second is at this point, we're not asking the community for a bond. And I want to be real clear about that. Everything that we're doing, the vote that's going to occur tomorrow, and I'm going to go into this in my superintendent's report, is that at this point, we have been very fiscally smart with this pot of dollars saved in Pepple, and we can accomplish everything that you see here without going out for increased taxes. And so this is smart fiscal management of our dollars, and knowing that we're going to continue to move forward to make the necessary reductions or expansions to our facilities as necessary. So why to answer your question with the 3,000 still open seats, it's because we can't pick this building up and move it over here. As a matter of fact, that first pathway did that. Let's move our buildings to where the people are going to be, and it was at a $400 million price tag. So that was actually more fiscally irresponsible than the path that we're currently on.
I would also add there will likely be additional opportunities for efficiencies to be gained, but it really is going to take some work to explore. If the board is looking for that, that is something that can be delved into further and brought back, because there will be opportunities for continued efficiency through all of this as well. But this also, as TJ notes, provides an opportunity for a new vision for how education is delivered for the district, which, as it was said at the beginning, one of the goals was how can you attract and retain families, and how can you attract and retain staff? And it's going to be hard to do with what you have. Doing some level of update and improvement does start to create a new vision for how the Davenport School District is and operates as a educator of children and an employer of staff.
And a big chunk of what we're spending is reinvesting in existing buildings. So I think that's part of a key consideration to this too. We're putting money back into buildings that are existing already, and not being completely new facility, which would be a lot more money.
So you feel like, let's just take SMART for example. Okay, the access, stairs going up to it, by the office and everything. Is it practical to refurbish that part of the building? I mean, I'm sure you've looked at, let's tear the whole facility down and start over with brand new. And those numbers, what did you come up with?
It becomes cost prohibitive because you start to look at a number. Let me sort of rephrase that. Some of this goes back to what John Flynn said, which is you don't have to completely gut and change the whole inside of the building. You have to selectively and creatively work within the confines of the existing building, which is a lesser burden than reconstructing all of that. So from a fiscal responsibility, there is a little bit of trouble if you tear down 50,000 square feet to have to build back 50,000 square feet. That becomes a very expensive proposition, whereas you can sort of target your efforts within the confines of that existing building, start to reframe how it structures and works, then using the addition to provide some of those additional spaces that you just can't fit into that footprint.
Okay. Well, and along those same lines, as far as when you're talking about the potential budget, and we've got funds available, 135 million, but then you've got some big ranges here, and I understand it's not knowing exactly what you're going to do, but to me, what it's going to cost. But to me, those ranges are pretty big. But if you go and add that up and you go to the high end of those ranges, then we're talking 152 million. Okay, so if that's the case, are we going to cut back on projects, or what would occur at that time then?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
So when we were preparing this presentation, John was delivering more dialed in numbers, as they have done rough work of this. So the orange slots they actually have what does it look like inside those orange slots. But what I wanted to make sure is that we kept it broad enough, because that's not our decision. That's a decision that was made here. part of the thing that I'm going to ask at the end of this is what feedback towards the direction that we want to go. And so that's why those numbers are broad. If we do, say, for example, if you say, I want to go all the way up to the max on these two projects, then we know that we could do some things in the other categories. So that's why they're all, if you were to do every single one of them, it would be over the top. But what we're asking to do is we have to make some choices to channel our inner Gary Sinclair. We can do anything we want. We just can't do everything we want. So that's kind of what we were channeling there.
And then under, I guess I need an explanation here. I'm not sure I'm looking at this correctly. Facility study improvements. So to do the facility study, like for SMART, it's going to be $12 million just to do a study?
No. That is the repairs and updates that came out of that big 600-page document. So any of the items that reported through that assessment as poor were explored in terms of magnitude of cost. And this would be if you touched every issue that was rated as poor in SMART, it would cost you about $12.5 million to update that. We would tell you that you probably don't have to do all of it in one shot. Some of it will get addressed through some of the bigger project of addition and renovation, which means you're looking at probably a smaller number to do that update and improvement. So a lot of this is deferred maintenance or end of life cycle cost for some of those things in those buildings.
So what you're saying is if you did nothing at SMART except just what needed to be done, it would be 12 million.
Correct. If you said, I want to try to fix all the deficits there, 12.5 million.
Okay. So then go back up to the addition and renovation budget, 39 million. So is that 12 million? Will you save that 12 million by going with the 39 million renovation?
You'll save some of it,
okay,
not all of it. For example, you might save some of the mechanical and electrical system costs when you do that addition and renovation. Some of the remodeling work you have to do will address some of the building interior and FFE costs. It won't cover all of it necessarily. So it becomes important to know what the priority is and start to build what that template of budget looks like for that building. I would also note the $39.5 million is a hefty number. There's still some work to do there to massage that number. That number can be improved and will be improved if we're given direction to keep pursuing what that solution is there. But we have to start somewhere just for conversation.
Okay. Thank you.
Director Beck.
I think in terms of sort of going back to what Director Potts said, my short question was, when you're talking about like a media center in an area that's more accessible and open, is that something like what is that Buffalo right now, where there's like if I remember the room where they were doing the science, they do the science and they have the computer stations, but it seems accessible from multiple directions. Is that what you guys are talking about, sort of a more accessible, centrally located area?
Are you talking for the north?
For the library.
Yeah. So part of that is looking at just the change of how media centers are nowadays, right, and how those are more of a collaborative, flexible use space, and just appropriately designing that for the building. And then what that would allow is a different kind of approach to how that space could be used, and that existing space could be reconfigured to be used as academic space in the building. So it is going to be a little bit of a paradigm shift for how that building lays out.
Okay. So kind of going back to what Director Potts was saying, I guess my inclination would be to err on the side of caution with a lot of these new type spaces. I find that if it's much easier to reconfigure the furniture in a classroom or, make a classroom more modular, because in 20 years we may find that, these open spaces are completely useless. And I'm not saying that's necessarily going to happen, but, I don't want to paint ourselves into a corner, right? So to me, it would make more sense to just be a little bit cautious with, kind of completely revamping the way we think of classrooms and things like that, in shared space. And then my other part is just kind of a comment. So I think of students and teachers and staff and classrooms sort of like they will expand to fill whatever space is available. And so by putting money into, it's not like because they're filling the spaces that are available, it doesn't mean we don't have space. As Mr. Flynn said, it's not the right space. So to me, it actually made a lot of sense saying we're going to put some money into reconfiguring and updating Sudlow and Smart, for example, because though we have empty spaces, they're not necessarily in the junior high or in, these other buildings. And yeah, people will move to fill up whatever space they have. So I appreciate thinking at where we have the most need in terms of making improvements to attract people to the district and retain students. The junior highs, I think, are a good place to start.
I also would address a little bit of your first comment about, how you approach the design of the education in any building, as it will still be something that requires development and collaboration and communication. So part of in the schedule, you'll see some beginning bars for each project. A good example is what occurred at the West High School project. We were given some basic target goals for that project. And then there was a good amount of staff and teacher and coach development that happened through that project, where we had interactive sessions, and they helped us appropriately plan the response for that project. So it gave them what they needed. And we kept a cautious eye on budget and scale so that we weren't overdoing or overpromising, but we were delivering what was useful and necessary for that. For any of these projects, it will be necessary that there is still an engagement that happens with staff and leadership in those buildings, so that the solutions and the layout and the design is appropriate for how they need to use it. And that's why we say that what's currently targeted is kind of a big picture look, and it's going to take some additional work to massage that into the right answer. And then the next thing is it helps you as a district start to create a target model for how the district looks in whole. So you're not approaching every building differently, but you start to employ the right solutions at the right buildings, and then you can, as a district, provide some of the right themes throughout that can create some uniformness in how you're delivering your curriculum to the students that are going to benefit from it.
Jackson.
I just wanted to go back to what I think Director Potts had said about the fitting the kids through lunch lines, and maybe this is more of a question for TJ. Has it been considered kind of adopting the high school style 4 lunch blocks or like 4 lunch periods for the middle schools to possibly avoid that without increasing the size of the lunch lines physically? Am I remembering what was talked about correctly?
I can get you an answer to that. I think we already do that according to Dr.
Yeah, my son attends Sudlow, and there are 4 lunches, maybe 5, A, B, C, D, E, to accommodate everybody. And they get like 16 minutes or something. It's a very short period of time. He doesn't eat lunch until after 1 o'clock, because he's in the last one. But yes, they already do that at our junior highs.
That's interesting you say that, because I could have. I mean, obviously I'm not calling you a liar, but when I went to Wood, they only had 2. So I don't know if that's changed since I left, or if that's a Wood specific thing.
Well, I can't speak for the other junior highs, but I know at least Sudlow does that. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I have a couple since no one else has any. First, thank you for the presentation. Secondly, thank you for listening to some of the concerns. I know board members have mentioned classrooms being like closets. You bring us a plan to fix that, and then we kind of contradict what we have said before. So I want to thank you for that, because we do have a lot of small classrooms. But when our district was originally made, there was it's like churches. Schools were on every corner pretty much. So classrooms could be smaller and things like that. So it's nice to look at that. And also, we've talked about declining enrollment, and we need to figure out how to fix that. I feel with the exploratories being brought down in the junior highs, that helps a lot. With the athletic turfs and things like that, and later on we're going to vote on weight room equipment. If we're able to offer these kids better, I don't want to say amenities, but better attractions to come to our district, they see that, and that gets people involved instead of having old, outdated things. So I appreciate that. I know it took a lot of time to do all these things, and I know there's going to be other efficiency things that we're going to need to do down the road, but we do have to start doing some things now. And especially for like Sudlow and Smart, it's nice for those folks in those areas to see us considering investing back in those areas. So I do appreciate that. And then as well as touching all of the schools, because a lot of schools get left behind. That's why we're where we are now, because it wasn't adequately taken care of over the years, which that's no one here's fault on that. And pretty much everybody else asked a ton of the questions I was going to, but again, I do want to thank the team and all of you for taking those things and concerns that we brought over the course of our tenure on the board about things like that. And especially thank you for looking at making the classrooms bigger, because, and I know Director Klein-Jerome always talks about teachers in the classrooms. Well, we'll be giving them a better space to work on, so that's good to hear. And things like that, and just updating things. Not everything's the same as it was back, in the 1800s and things like that. Things change. Things aren't built like they were back then, so that's why it's nice to add on to those things and do stuff like that. So, and I do appreciate the way that the presentation was laid out with what it could look like if we did these certain things and stuff, because I think it's better, like the West High School project, just to see that stuff and what it is. I think sometimes when we talk about things, it's a lot better when you actually get to see it, and then it's better like for us to go to the community and talk about things like that as well, because hey, these are the things we're looking at doing. And I do want to be very clear that no one's made any decisions or anything. This has been presented to us. And we're just discussing this, so no one runs out on this and thinks that this is what we're doing right now. And my other question would be, what is your timeline for us to give you direction on this? Because obviously we need to start doing something sooner than later, because the longer it goes, then it pushes out. And I do actually work in construction, so I do understand the part if you do that, and then when school's out, you can come back and do the existing building and things like that. And I'm glad that it's planned like that. But I guess what information do you need from us, and then what would be your timeline for us to get back to you to either take action on this or however we do it?
So that's the big piece of feedback that we need from the board tonight. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of going around the horn, are we on the right path? More of this, less of that? Do you need more information? I think Director Poshton's questions about the budget and some of those questions, we can go down the path and continue to align that with the projects So are we on the right path? Is the vision, everything that you're hearing from your constituents in the communities? This is what we heard coming out of during the first phase, which we're rounding that now. And you're right. We need to get going. We know that there are several things in here that are things that are absolute next steps, and we should be moving towards them, but we want to make sure that we're tightly aligned so that way we can bring a plan as soon as possible to the school board. So if you wouldn't mind, we would appreciate it.
Jackson, I'm going to start with you, man. We'll let you go, and then we'll go Director Gordon and work around. I want the student perspective on that.
I'm gonna be completely honest. I don't know what to say. Could we maybe go from the other direction to me? I'm sorry.
All right, Director Gordon.
I do think that this is overall a good path. I'm really excited to see that we're going to put some money into the middle schools and the elementary schools, because one thing that I hear a lot is how much money we pour into the high schools, some more than others. And I know everybody has their opinions about that, but having been in several of the middle schools and elementary schools, I agree it's time to put some money there and get those buildings updated and give kids a better starting ground in the district to keep them around. So that's my input.
Thank you, Director Potts.
I'm very pleased with the direction we're going in. We have to remind ourselves that this direction is a result of the years-long committees and parents and other people we've had giving us this input. I remember being at the first public session, and the general consensus there was we have to do something with the junior highs. That was clearly stated by a number of parents. I think we should let bids for the demo tomorrow. Well, and this is concept. We don't know what the finished product's going to look like. We don't exactly know what's going to go in those four walls, but we got to give the green light to move forward. Keeping in mind, I believe one of our neighboring districts has a $70 million bond issue coming up tomorrow, most of which is to be spent on their middle school. And we are in a competition. We're in a competition not just with other public schools, but with private and parochial schools. And that's something I think we need to keep in the back of our heads also.
Thank you, Director Kleintrom.
I'm okay with that phase one potential budget list going from west. I mean, just kind of checking it off as you go. Washington and Monroe next on there. Smart, Sudlow, North High. Elementary projects I think are a little weak, but that part I'm okay with at this point.
Thank you. Director Beck?
I'm fine with phase one as it's been presented so far. I think it puts us in the right direction, and it's putting our resources where people have indicated that we need it. And I phase two, I understand, is just sort of a what's possible. So I look forward to having those kinds of discussions later.
Thank you, Director Poston.
Yeah, I'm fine with phase one. I think we just all have to keep in mind, we've got to look at our budget. We've got to look at the finances. And again, we're spending taxpayers' dollars here. I don't care if there's $135 million in our pot of money. That was taxpayers' dollars, okay? So I think we need to be wise as we're spending the money. And one thing I failed to mention earlier, we still have a lot of properties here in the district. And I think if not in phase one, shortly after, we need to be turning those properties to cash. And then we can take that money and do more in phase two. But there's no need of hanging on to all these properties. Get them back on the tax rolls. And the other thing is there was no mention about Mid-City and what we're going to do with the Buchanan building. So I don't know if that Buchanan building is just going to be mothballed for a while, or, you know, what's going to happen. But again, let's not hang on to that building forever. And then, you know, how does Mid-City fit into this whole scheme of things? And the other thing too, I failed to mention earlier, I want to thank the Long Range Planning Committee for all the time and effort that you guys put into it. I want to thank Bray Architects, John. I know you've put a lot of effort into this, and Josh. This has not been an easy road to go down, and but I think we're headed in the right direction. I just want to make sure that we spend these dollars wisely.
Thank you. Director Hayes.
I agree with the proposal for phase one. You had asked earlier if the money should be allocated equally to each of the buildings, and I feel that it should be given to the buildings that need it most and worked down to get the most important projects out of the way, to provide as near as possible equal maintenance to all the buildings. So one may require a little bit more than others to get where it needs to be.
Thank you. You ready now? All right, Jackson.
So, kind of want to echo also what Director Poston said, that yeah, I would be very interested to see what, if anything, we will end up doing with Mid-City. I said many times before that Mid-City still has a very, very special place in my heart. The people that work there and have worked there are amazing people, very hardworking, and they really do perform magic there. I'm serious. I don't know if people there actually have magical powers or not. I haven't confirmed or denied that yet. So that would be very good to know. And I also would like to, and I know this doesn't exactly have to do with you guys, at least I don't think it does, but I really would be interested in seeing kind of a somewhat of a more comprehensive transition plan for the middle schoolers, for the 6th grade to middle school kind of transition, because like you guys have said, I really think that is something that, even if maybe it's maybe the parents won't know what to do with it, or the teachers, I think that it will be great for the students, especially those who are going to, randomly get hit by this, that just a little bit of comfort for them will be great for them. And then lastly, I'm very proud of tomorrow because I will be able to vote for the first time ever in an election. And this presentation has made me a lot more confident in how I'm going to vote tomorrow. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Just to clarify, when you're voting, it's not to increase taxes. It's not a bond referendum. Can't stress that enough.
I don't believe you. Kidding.
I want to echo what Director Poston said and thank the Long Range Facilities Plan and all of the folks that helped out. I think it makes it a little easier for us to make these decisions with how transparent the process has been and how much engagement we've had during it. And just the fact that we're all stating, the things that we need, and that's being met and addressed. So I greatly appreciate that. It's been quite the process to go through the things that we've had to do, but again, we're picking up slack from predecessors and things like that, and we're doing the hard things that should have been done that weren't done. So again, thank you all for that. So I'm assuming that we would be able to vote on this probably.
This gives us excellent direction. I believe that until it's voted on, I think we should just have an update at our every meeting. So
okay, perfect. All right, thank you again for the great presentation.
Thank you as well. We appreciate the opportunity to continue to look at this new direction with you.
Thank you. Now we are going to take a quick 5-minute break, and then we will be right back. All right, and we're back. We will move on to board reports. Are there any board reports? Director Hayes.
I'd like to thank the Truman staff, Chrissy Willits and Ms. Peterson and Ms. Corey, for showing me around their building and doing the classes with them for the, well, in the first grade, I thought I was going to watch the math. However, that day was testing day, so some were doing waggle, some were doing testing, some were doing other assignments on the board, and that was actually the highest class in the district, the first graders. So I was pretty excited for that. And, you know, on another note, my grandson's in that class, right? He was acting real weird that day. And I'm like, what's wrong, Chasey? He wouldn't really talk to me. His mom picks him up as soon as he gets in the car. I was so embarrassed. Nana came in my class and was in my class. So I told her, I want to come back, but I would like to see another class in action. I don't want to embarrass my baby any further. But they were so well mannered, and there was one little fella in there, I can't do this, and Chrissy actually overheard him, and she went in and she helped him, and you know, from his facial expression, she actually he was pleased with what she did. In the sixth graders, they were great, and I liked the flexibility in the class. Mrs. Corey, you know, she really had them under control, but she allowed a lot of leeway for them, and she explained one other concept, which I thought was really well. With the transitioning to seventh grade, the students will no longer have recess. So what she's done to sort of accommodate them, she lets them go outside, but they can't take any equipment. That's social time. So she calls it just talk time for them, and they're able to talk and kind of socialize with each other to kind of get them out of the mood of wanting to play a lot at recess time. So I enjoyed my time at Truman. I would really want to go back again, but again, like I said, to another first grade classroom.
Thank you, Director Gordon.
Director Klein-Jerome already kind of spoke to this, but I went to the show choir thing today also, and it was absolutely phenomenal. And I don't have any of my own children in it, so I'm really just, this is not coming from Proud Mom this time. It's like, we have a legit, really amazing, all of the schools, all of the show choirs I saw, I was blown away. I cannot believe how amazing they are. And I can't dance at all, and I also can't sing, so I'm especially impressed. But yeah, good job, everybody.
Director Poston.
Back on February 28th, I attended the West Extravaganza with the choirs from West, Smart, Williams, and Walcott, and they put on a fantastic show, so much talent. And on March 1st, I attended the Creative Arts Academy showcase at Sudlow, and again, just so much talent. And you know, there's a reason that we're putting money into that Creative Arts Academy, because it's going to be a benefit to so many kids. And then I'd just like to thank the curriculum department for spending some time with me last week, reviewing some of the reading materials that they're looking and exploring.
Director Beck.
I was just going to reiterate, I also attended the Creative Arts Academy showcase on March 1st, and it is such a great program and so impressive. When you have a bunch of seventh graders all playing a random assortment of instruments and they can pull off Kashmir by Led Zeppelin, that's pretty impressive, and it speaks a lot to the teaching. Also, I just wanted to extend my thanks to all of our middle school teachers or junior high teachers, but they sit out there and they do conferences with anybody who walks by, and they also hang out with the kids on the same night. And, you know, being a junior high teacher, I think, is one of the hardest jobs. And so thank you to all of them for being available for parents and for students.
Thank you, Director Beck and Director Posham, for your board reports. Are there any other board reports? All right. Communications, Brenda, do we have any, no virtual open forum requests? No open forum requests in here, so we'll move on from that. May I have a motion on the consent agenda?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes.
I move that we accept the consent agenda as written.
Thank you. Is there a second? Beck, gotcha. Now, when I call for the vote, make sure you guys all turn your microphones on so your votes are recorded, please. The motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Superintendent report.
Thank you. I'd like to take this time to talk about the very important revenue purpose statement that's going to be voted on tomorrow. So Davenport Community School is asking for an extension on our revenue purpose statement. This statement generally describes how the district plans to spend the dollars from the SAVE Fund, which stands for Secure and Advanced Vision for Education. So what is SAVE? SAVE is a statewide penny sales tax, and it generates approximately $17 million a year for DCSD. And these monies received shall be utilized solely for school infrastructure needs or school district property tax relief. These activities include construction, reconstruction, repair, demolition work, purchasing or remodeling of schoolhouses, stadiums, gyms, field houses, and bus garages, and the procurement of schoolhouse construction sites and making site improvements. Now, this is probably the most important thing that I really want to stress. What SAVE is not. It is not property tax, and it cannot be used for salaries, benefits, or general operating expenses. So in the past, you saw some examples of how we plan to use these dollars, but in the past here are some of the projects that we've done. The Central Pool and Auditorium, West Hallway remodel, the Fillmore remodel, the Wood Gym addition, the Truman remodel, Brady Street track and stadium renovations, LED lighting projects across the district, Sudlow additions in Mid-City. So the revenue purpose statement, DCSD's current revenue purpose statement is in effect through 2029. And to meet our district's needs, we may have to do some long-term borrowing. In order to allow for that, we need to extend the life of the resolution that we have. So a yes vote tomorrow will allow us to meet the district's future needs. So how will these funds be used? As you saw a wonderful presentation tonight, we are planning to use our dollars in that way. We're going to revamp our middle schools, modernize our classroom spaces at all levels, and upgrading our facilities in the areas of the academics, the arts, and the athletics. So one critical thing that's really important for tomorrow's vote is some districts are going out for a bond and to borrow against property tax. In the March 7 vote, Bettendorf and Durant are meeting their district's needs by requesting additional borrowing through local property tax. DCSD is not doing that. This is not an impact to our property tax. So for tomorrow, please consider that as you go out to the polls. And I was so proud when I heard that you're going to be going out tomorrow. So Jackson, there's a little bit of information, and as you're out in the community tonight, make sure you share that. So thank you for that opportunity, President Goza.
Thank you for the superintendent report. Committee reports. Do you have a data wall?
Yes, we have a meeting scheduled after spring break. We're going to be finalizing the build out of that. We have also gathered some local districts that have built some visualizations that are pretty powerful, and we're going to be reviewing that, setting a plan to have our data wall up and installed before the end of the school year.
Thank you. Finance Committee?
We're meeting Thursday after spring break. Is that correct?
Legislative advocacy. Did you guys report on going to the Capitol? Myself, Superintendent Schneckloff, and Director Poston went to the ISB Day on the Hill, and I believe we talked to every one of our legislators except Monica Korth because she was in committee meetings. Gary Moore even came in and talked to us, and he's no longer represents anywhere in our area, but we had some good conversations with the legislators, and we were up there advocating for preschool funding as well as teacher recruitment and retention. So we had some good conversations with the legislators, and it was a good time. We were up there all day. If you want to add anything, Director Posh.
No, just if you go on the Iowa IASB website under legislative, there are some bills coming up, and I can't think of them right now off the top of my head, but there are a couple of them that it would be good if you would contact your legislature and legislator and just fill them in on what your thoughts are on that. But IASB does a good job of putting that on their website. And
Thank you for adding that. Did I miss anything else? Elziak. Nothing? at this
We
time?
don't have a meeting for a few weeks.
Okay. Long-range facilities planning.
Nothing to report.
Policy committee.
We meet on Wednesday, and the agenda will be out tomorrow.
Thank you. Did I miss any? All right, we will move on to items requiring action. May I have a motion on subject 10.01 high school strength and conditioning curriculum adoption?
Mr. President,
Director Gordon.
I recommend the board approve the strength and conditioning curriculum adoption for all high schools for a total of $66,924.37 using district ESSER funds.
Second.
All right, the motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. May I have a motion on subject 10.02, purchase of engineering equipment for Central, North, and West High Schools?
Mr. President,
Director Beck.
I move the board approve the order of VEX robotics equipment for DCSD engineering classrooms for $86,722.92.
Second.
The motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. May I have a motion on subject 10.03 weight room equipment replacement for West, North, and Central High Schools?
Mr. President,
Director Poston.
move the board approve the purchase of weight equipment for West, North, and Central High Schools from Connor Athletic Products Incorporated for the amount of $731,488.56.
Second.
The motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. May I have a motion on subject 10.04 policies for board's approval?
Mr. President,
Director Klein Jerome.
I recommend the board approve the following policies: 403.02, 403.04, 405.01, 405.02, 405.03, 405.04, 405.09, 406.01, 406.02, 406.04, 406.06, 407.05, 408.01, 409.01, 411.01, 411.04, 411.07, 411.08, 412.01, 412.02, 412.04, 413.02, 413.03, 413.04, 413.05, 414, 503.06, 505.08, 804.06, and 6.07.
I think you missed one.
Okay,
Is
sing
there a
it.
second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Potts. The motion's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. We will move on to discussion items. The only discussion item we have tonight is about hiring Bray Architects to continue Phase 1 planning. Turn it over to Superintendent.
So you guys all heard tonight in the presentation about our phase 1 plans for the district. We've been in discussion about how to speed up some processes, make things more efficient. And one thing that came to light is how long it takes contracts to get through the process of going through the board and approvals and all those things. So with the number of projects we have coming, each one of those things takes a number of weeks to get through, therefore adding to the length of all the projects and how long it takes. Bray's been working with us for, a year and a half now, 2 years probably. They've heard all of the discussions. They've been through all of the meetings. They've met with every person that I've met with, TJ's met with at the committee meetings. What we would like to think about doing or possibly do is work with them to do a contract to work with us through all the phase 1 projects of the long range facility plan. It's a little bit unusual, but not completely unheard of. So what we would do is think about a salary, or not a salary, but a range of dollars and an associated percentage of a project that they would charge. So when I bring you guys a project for, say, $2 million, every architecture firm we work with says, I'm going to charge you 5.7%. I'm going to charge you 6.2%. And we kind of just wait for those bids to come back. What we're looking to do is work with Bray to have an upfront percentage charge for the projects based on size. If we approve something like that, rather than spending weeks and time coming back with a document saying Bray is going to charge us this much money based on the bid of this project or their estimate of this project, we can do that up front and just move things along. Is there anything you want to add to that or think of?
So one of the things that Josh and his team are working through right now is a contract, and it's going through their attorneys, our attorneys, and we did not have that to bring to you tonight. What we're going to do the second that our attorneys have gone through it, I'll put it in a Friday report, and then that way we can continue to review, ask questions. But it would be our plan, if the board gives us that direction, to bring this forward for a vote at the next meeting, if you feel that's appropriate. For a year and a half, we've set out on a journey to provide equity and voice, to listen to our community, to go through, to have someone lead us through that. And Bray did an outstanding job. And we meet every Friday, and they haven't missed a meeting. And the projects that they've done, they've delivered on, and that's hard to say. And so for us, we have an opportunity to get some projects completed during this summer months, and we think that we've got a reputable company. As for example, their CEO comes down to those meetings periodically. He's on almost every Friday, and then of course John is here locally in an office downtown on 2nd Street, and so they've been responsive. They also understand our community. John, his experience with our community, having students come through the community, knows the different sections of it. We find it to be valuable, and the envelopes that have already been created will allow us to continue to move faster. So we've got to work through the contract piece, but the second we get that, we'll get that in the board's hands for any kind of questions that you might bring forward during a future vote. But that's our recommendation right now. Josh, anything to that?
No, I think that covers everything I wanted to talk about.
Any questions?
Question, Director Potts.
I'm assuming, sure you never should assume, but I'm assuming this would be in conformance with the Iowa Code concerning how we can dispose of our funds.
Yes.
a one-word answer. You'll never get elected to the school board.
I don't plan to run.
Director Beck?
Will we achieve any bundled savings by doing this?
I think we would in terms of percentage of what they would charge for projects and turnaround time helps speed things up. There's costs not involved that aren't even on the sheet probably that you don't see. But I think overall we're getting a good price for what we're asking for, and it's really laid out right in front of us. So when the contract is done, you will be able to see right where they fall.
Okay.
Director Poston?
When you put phase one and phase two together, say you go through the entire project and you're the architects for that, how big a project is this compared to anything else you're doing?
We're actually in a fortunate situation that Bray as a firm has done projects in excess of 180 to 200 million dollars, and as small as $20,000. So firm wide, we have a staff of 80 plus individuals who are ranging from technical staff architects that we can use as a resource to pull together to do a magnitude of cost that equally rivals the amount of work that you're considering for this district.
But bottom line, this is a big project for you then?
Correct. This is not unfamiliar for us, though. On an annual basis, we do this volume of work regularly.
And they are adding staff here locally also. So your office is growing.
Okay. Well, Josh, I appreciate where you're coming from as far as working with one architect, and I have no problems with what Bray Architects have done. I still have a problem with not getting a bid, and I always will have a problem with that. Okay.
Okay.
Any other questions? So I want to say from myself, from the standpoint of when we got together and interviewed architects to start this project, Bray was one of the best, well-equipped ones when we were interviewing and going through our checklist. And I don't even remember how many people were on that committee, but we got together afterwards and compared notes and kind of went from there. But also, like Director Beck's question, I would assume that we would have a lot of cost savings because you all have already done, our buildings inside and out. I mean, what's wrong here and there and everywhere, and things like that.
I think about, not to interrupt, but establishing norms with an architect. Once you establish that norm with a firm, it goes from one project to the next, and you don't have to reestablish that. So you're exactly correct.
Well, and then they don't have to put all the work into doing all of that stuff again and everything like that. And we haven't got any change orders from you yet, knock on wood. And I love that. I appreciate that very much. And Bruce can attest to this too, for being on the Long Range Facilities Planning Committee, which I'm not going to speak for him, but they've been great to deal with and things like that. And kind of, they've been through this process and they're able to answer questions, and a very detailed presentation we usually always get too from these guys. So it's not something that I'm used to from the ones that kind of come through here, I suppose I'd say. So I just want to say that, and I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Bruce, but they've been great to work with.
I'll second what you said.
Say that in the microphone so I get you on camera. What'd you say? Any other questions?
I want to clarify one thing also before we go offline. Outside of phase one projects, other architecture firms can be utilized for work. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that this is really about phase one of our large projects. But outside of that, we're open to use other firms as well.
That was my other question, Josh. Thanks. So I'm going to do like we did earlier with the phase one part and kind of go around and see where everyone's at, what other information you would need. Because I'm assuming you're going to bring this to us after you guys figure out the price. And I do love the fact of the upfront pricing. So it's not, I don't want to say we get gouged, but it kind of eliminates that. So I'll start on this end with, Director Beck.
I think it's a great idea, particularly if it can speed things along in a way that's safe and legal. But I would also want to see, what the idea is, and like the numbers, like you promised. But also, I do expect that we should be able to get a slightly better deal compared to if we went out for an RFP for everything, because that background legwork will have been done for all of the projects essentially at once, basically. So.
Thank you, Director Boston.
I'm expecting the quantity discount, Josh. Yeah.
I agree.
Thank you, Director Hayes.
I am okay with it. At least we're not having to go out and reinvent the wheel for each project. You're familiar with it. And there's basically a starting point we already have. So I would certainly support it.
Thank you, Director Kleindrum.
I do not need any additional information for this.
Thank you, Director Potts.
I'm good.
Thank you, Director Gordon.
I don't need any information either.
Thank you. I'm going to second what Director Poston. I'd like to see some bundle discounts. When you bundle things, you save some money. So I just want to reiterate that. Bundling. All right, thank you. Administrative reports.
Not at this time.
Board requests. Is there any board requests? I thought you were getting ready to pull one out. All right, none at this time. Board reflections, we'll start with Director Gordon.
I just want to thank you for the whole presentation tonight. And again, reiterate how excited I am that the junior highs are going to get some much needed attention. Elementaries, I think that this is going to set us on a good path for our district. And I know transitions and changes are hard, but I think like long term, this is going to be something exciting for people in our community to look forward to.
Thank you. Director Potts?
Yeah, for me, it was the long-range facility presentation. It dominated the evening. It's got us in a direction that I think will have long-lasting impact on our schools and our students.
Thank you. Director Klein-Jerome?
I agree with the last two comments.
Smooth. Director Hayes?
Ditto.
Director Poston? By far, the phase one plan, is dominated our discussion tonight, and is going to be huge for the district. But also under items requiring action, I think the strength and conditioning curriculum adoption, that is going to be huge. The engineering equipment and the weight room equipment, I think that's going to be phenomenal.
Thank you. Director Beck?
For me, it was the long-range facilities plan presentation. It's an example of how far we've come in terms of this board and this district in our planning, our data-driven decisions, and listening to the community, and being much more transparent than we were 6 or 7 years ago. So,
thank you. Superintendent Schneckloff?
I second that.
All right. I second what everyone said, and I'm just so glad we're finally updating the weight room equipment. They've needed that for a long, long time, so Thank you all very, very much. I get a lot of calls about that, so I appreciate that. And with that, Director Potts, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Ayes have it, meeting adjourned.